G'day everyone, I'm really looking forward to today's episode, more so than most, because today we're talking about three topics that I am deeply passionate about, specifically. And first, helping people build and improve their communication skills is something that I've been doing for most of my career. Secondly, cracking the code on scaling company culture and using tools to help us do that. The old saying is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And one of the executives' biggest challenges is how do I take my culture from the top and get that happening throughout the company? And last but not least, actual real world ROI generating use cases that deliver unambiguous benefits. So let's go. Welcome to another episode of the AI Forecast, proudly sponsored by the amazing folks at Cloudera. I'm your host, Paul Muller. Join me along with leading companies and industry experts every week as we explore the past, the present, and the future of AI and data in the enterprise. And if you like what you've heard on previous podcasts, and we hope you do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with others who might find the podcast valuable. Well, today's guest is Varun Puri. Varun cut his teeth at Google early in his career, working directly for, if I understand correctly, Sergey Brin. Desperately curious to find out what that was like, eventually moving into their storied Google X Ventures business before co-founding the AI-powered executive comms and coaching tool Yoodli, where he is CEO today. Welcome to the podcast, Varun.
It is so exciting to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Where do we find you today? Where in the world are you?
I'm in Seattle. I was going to say gloomy Seattle at the start of the podcast, but the sun is now out. So bright and sunny day in Seattle.
Superb. I love that. And is that where Yoodli are based?
Yeah. I joke that we're headquartered in Seattle, but I spend most of my time either in SF or on the road.
Yeah, that's such is the life of an executive. Well, we're a bit of an odd podcast. We're a kind of dessert before dinner podcast. We do our lightning round before we get into the topic. Are you ready to play the game?
Cannot wait. Fun fact, actually, when we started Yoodli, I wanted to build the world championship of impromptu speaking. So we actually have a bunch of AI impromptu speaking games. So you should hold me to a high bar.
Ooh, I need to see this technology. All right. First up, what would people who know you best, it could be friends, family, work colleagues, the President of the United States, what would people who know you best say is your superpower? I
think my authenticity. I don't know if I'm right, I'm wrong, I'm funny, I'm not, but I'm myself, and I'm myself with everyone.
I love that. That's an amazing thing. Don't lose that. Next up, the most impactful technology of all time.
Too early to say, maybe too cliched, but I do think AI already, and the potential it holds is totally nuts.
I'll take the answer. We talk about AI automating things for business, for others. Get a little selfish. What would you like to see AI automate for you in your future?
I'm using AI at scale at work. I wish AI could help me in my personal life a little bit more. Help me manage my CRM, friendships, my laundry lists and grocery lists, not in a way where I'm talking to Alexa and then maybe it shows up on my fridge, in a way that's truly seamless so that I can focus on being a good friend, a good boyfriend, a good son.
Just quick sidebar. That is quite possibly one of the most popular responses to that question in the nearly 100 episodes we've done. Any product managers listening, there is money to be made there because everybody wants it. All right, last but not least, what are some of the best practices you've learned as someone who works with data daily?
My tagline with data is skim through data, rely on gut. I think far too often we get overly obsessed with data analysis and how's this segment doing and how's the other segment doing. But also as a CEO and an exec, I think a lot of your role is to have conviction based on conversations and anecdotes and then use the data to support or invalidate that.
I'm making a note of that. That's got to be one of the quotes of the year.
You put pressure on me. After my last answer, you told me it was highly commoditized, so I had to come up with a good answer for the next one.
I'm digging it. I like the fact that I can make you squirm a little. That makes me feel like that makes me feel so powerful, Varun. I'm only kidding. So speaking of power, I mean, I was doing a little bit of reading through your bio, as one does, and obviously it looks, early in your career, intern, getting started. As you'd expect, a couple of intern jobs, and suddenly you're at Google. And do I understand it correctly? Before you went on to Google X, you were working directly for Sergey?
Yes, it was a dream job, life-changing opportunity right out of college.
Or nightmare.
There were lots of stories in that as well, but the role was, I was the only person at Alphabet reporting to Sergey. I didn't have a title. Think of me as Sergey's fixer. I wasn't assistant, I wasn't chief of staff, I was doing Sergey projects. So every week I would give the Alphabet leadership team my State of the Union. And I'm obviously the little guy, I don't know much about much, but I'm going and talking to the other bets, so not Google, but Verily, Wing, Waymo, Calico, Google X, and sharing with them, hey, here's what the little guy's seeing. Or Sergey would have an idea and say, Varun, go make that happen. So lots of learning, lots of very fast moving, and lots of uncertainty.
I can only imagine. And obviously then on to Google X as part of what you were doing. What did that teach you, especially starting so early in your career, in what I would describe as something of I would characterize it as exciting, but also a terrifying opportunity because, in some respects, the only way would feel like down. So there'd be a lot of risk aversion, a lot of second guessing, certainly that I'd be doing. And I can imagine other young people starting in their careers would be doing. So for people who might be in that position now where they've got, that first chance, what did it teach you about starting, scaling innovation? What did it teach you about being given opportunity?
My biggest learning at Google and then at X was I was so lucky to be meeting these role models and idols you read about in your textbooks and in the news and in the Wall Street Journal. And my biggest realization was they are people too. They're incredibly smart. They've got lucky. They have a lot going for them. But, when they sneeze, they need a handkerchief and they wear their pant one leg at a time. And when they are sad, you can go and give them a hug. And I think in the Sergey role, I saw this. A lot of people would come to Sergey with, hey, I'm a CEO, can I get more headcount? Or I'm a journalist, what's the future of AI? Or I'm an intern, can I get an autograph? A lot of my role was, hi, how's it going? And in starting, I'm by no means Sergey, I'm by no means a successful exec. I'm a first-time founder just trying to make this dream a reality. But my biggest learning is everyone's a human. We idolize people and we get in our heads and we try to over-optimize this game to show up a certain way in front of a certain audience. Just be yourself because the person on the other side is likely being themselves.
That's just an incredible piece of advice. Yeah, I love that. We can talk about that a bit more after the show because I think we can have an outtake section. Let's jump on then to Yoodli because, as you say, first-time founder. What inspired you to create? Well, maybe we'll talk a bit about what Yoodli is in your words, but what inspired you to create it?
Yeah, the core problem is I just think too many smart people in the world struggle to communicate with confidence and they miss out on opportunities they deserve. You know this person, I know this person, we've been this person. The night before a speech, an interview, a salary negotiation, as we are talking out loud to a mirror, a camera, or a stopwatch. Or, in my world, there are billions of kids back home in India who deserve the Sergey job a lot more than me. There are introverts who deserve that McKinsey job, but they don't play the game when it's the ping pong balls and Boeing 747 questions. Or there are women who deserve the promotion a lot more than men who might have gotten it, who quote unquote show up on stage. And I just think that's unfair. So the dream behind Yoodli is how do you give people a private judgment-free space to be the best version of themselves and to build their skills. So when we started, it was a la Grammarly for speech, Duolingo for speech, Strava, Peloton, Apple Health for speech. And the reason being, my alternative today is my mirror, my camera, my stopwatch.
I love it. I think it's great. I likened it to my public speaking Yoda because it's the idea that it sort of sits there and just gives you what I would call kind of not so much emotion free, but the idea that it gives you this objective feedback on what you're doing and does it in a really patient way where you can just kind of go over and over, as you say. It's an amazing concept.
No, thank you for saying that. And in that vein, we actually started Yoodli as an AI public speaking coach. It was so palpable, right? 2 out of 3 people in the world say the fear of public speaking is at par with the fear of death. How do we go and help them out? And then one thing led to another, and then we expanded from public speaking to interview prep to sales pitches to customer success to role plays to getting into the enterprise. But the very core idea, and still what gets me excited, is how do we help people show up at their best in the conversations that matter the most?
No, I love it. I think it's brilliant. And as I say, it's one of the challenges when you're working with people on their public speaking, especially where it's not part of a formal program. It's a little bit like the fear of flying. Everyone says, well, the first thing you do is throw someone on a plane, but that can be pretty terrifying to folks. The idea that instead of, while you're rehearsing the first couple, instead of a mirror, as you say, which has its own challenges, and instead of putting you straight in front of an audience, which can actually, that fear response, fight or flight kicks off, and it can actually ruin people for life because it actually confirms that they're not good at things. To have that environment where a robot's listening to you, pardon me for calling it a robot, but a robot's listening to you exhibits a lot of the same behaviors of a human, but does it in a way that just calms at least one part of your mind, which is I'm not staring at someone else's eyeballs. I just thought it was an amazing way to get things rolling. What have you learnt about people? I presume you capture data as you're doing all of this. What have you learnt about people and I suppose soft skills and AI, that intersection of people and robots? What have you learnt about them during that process of rolling out Yoodli?
I often say we are not an AI company. In fact, I don't even care if AI is the solution. We are a behavior change company. The reason people struggle at the conversations that matter is because they don't practice. The number one way to get better is to record yourself and watch yourself and cringe and do that 3 more times. Now, the process of cringing sucks. Oh my God, I have a pimple. My voice sounds like this. I can't believe I said that. Oh, I don't want to do this. We found AI is, I think, a clever solution to say, no, you don't need to watch your video back, but look at minute 45. Let's look at your body language here. And by the way, your intro didn't land, or you could have used the rule of threes better. AI is just a way to get you to practice over and over again. AI gives you interesting insights. It gives org level statistics, but the core is practice and be more self-aware. If people did that, I think a lot of the problems in our world that happen because of lack of communication with one another could hopefully be resolved.
So you've obviously applied, and I love what you said, which is that just AI happens to be the technology that underpins it. It's not an AI company. It's a company that uses AI to solve a problem. I assume I've paraphrased you correctly. As I was looking at that, I've just finished going through my, the journey of learning to be a pilot. And how do you know someone's a pilot, by the way? They tell you. But in the process of that, one of the things that you have, and I don't have stage fright per se, I'm used to getting up on stage all the time, but what I did have was radio fright, jumping on pressing the button and talking to air traffic control. And because there's a lot of formalisms, there's kind of a jargon to it that you either have or you don't. It's super intimidating. Turns out I'm not the only one. Everyone has it. They describe, instead of the push to talk button, they call it the push to think button, because people press it and then start kind of, crap comes out of their mouth. That strikes me as another great use case for this kind of approach. Are there other areas where you can see benefits from having what I would loosely describe as a patient but well-intentioned listener?
I mean, it's been overwhelming to see the kinds of use cases this has unlocked. And maybe I'll give you some examples. There are the usual sales use cases. So Google, SAP, Salesforce, etc. will use us at scale to train their sales teams and their go-to-market teams before sales pitches, new methodology, new pricing, new packaging. In the old way, this was peer-to-peer role plays or static content. That's the most obvious use case in the enterprise. But what we've seen has been far above and beyond. I need to train my execs on media training. We've got to certify our managers on our new management methodology and make sure they're ready for crucial conversations. We've got to get our hypo employees to be able to deal with salary negotiations. We've got to get our entire teams interviewer certified so that when they're speaking with candidates, they're ready for game time. We've got to help our candidates be ready for game time in how they show up. We've got to help the customer success team with quarterly business reviews. We've got anybody going on stage, talking at stand-up in a team meeting, give them a judgment-free place to practice. we know that communication skills is the number one thing that comes up in every performance evaluation. The alternative today is go take a class or go read a book. We don't know if they're actually getting better. All of this is just in one enterprise. The kinds of use cases we've seen is, the government of El Salvador, for instance, is using Yoodli with doctors nationwide to train them on difficult doctor-patient conversations. Or some of the country's largest career services centers or outplacement companies use Yoodli for job interviews. We have dating coaches who've made Yoodli their own. We have football clubs who've made Yoodli their own on how do you speak in, I can't say the name, Club X brand voice. We have folks who use us for language learning. The obviously long-winded answer, but the crux of it is we all need to communicate at high-stakes events. Yoodli is a role-play simulator that you can customize around what you think good looks like. Google has a different methodology from Harvard Business School, from the government of El Salvador. A doctor uses a different framework than does a medical liaison, then does an SDR going through onboarding, then does an executive who's working with Spencer Stewart or Heidrick and Struggles. The core platform is the same.
Do you envisage, or as you're thinking about where the company, or let me rephrase the question, where that methodology or the technological approach is going, do you see I suppose maybe adjacencies is not the right word. This is a great example of, I think, applying AI in a way that to me, at least anyway, doesn't feel like a bolt-on to an existing thing. We've all seen it, whether it's putting a chatbot onto a product, putting some sort of basic analytics and report writing on top of your existing tool. Most of those tools that I've seen, or most of those use cases, the word inauthentic is probably overstating it, but they feel like the old adage is, when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. They feel like, we need to bolt AI onto this in order to at least make sure that our next earnings call goes well. This is a great example of, I think, where AI is at the core, but it's almost invisible, right? It's not, to your point, it's not a feature. It's a core enabler of something that couldn't be done without it. Let's talk then about the world of startups, because most businesses in the world by quantity, by number, are smaller businesses, maybe not startups, they might be established. There's a lot of talk about how AI can help the big companies. But I suppose as a founder, as a smaller company, how are you using and adopting AI in your world?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this, because folks often joke that I'm agentic, and we often don't know if it's me or my AI answering questions. But I'll give you a few examples. Pick anything that you think is helpful. Through the org, we use the usual stuff, Claude Code, marketing optimizations, etc. But in my day-to-day, I have daily alerts telling me exactly what's going on across the company. So people will often say, as an exec, you've got to be on the business. You can't be in the business. You can't be too far out of the weeds. I actually disagree. I think with AI, it is possible to know what's happening in every part of your business at all times. So I literally get reports on, here are the 5 deals that are speeding up. Here are the competitors that are heating up. Here's the AE who's been on vacation for a few extra days. And by the way, this is someone on your team who's been extra silent. Maybe go check in on them. So just general pulse of the business reports. The second is all of the productivity improvements. So I come into work in the morning, all of my emails are automatically drafted. I have a few LinkedIn posts that are ready for me to review. I have my morning brief, my weekly brief in terms of who I'm going to meet, what I should know. And then the last, I think the first two most people do. The last is I've been trying to find ways to use AI to be more of myself or to work on my areas of improvement. I'll give you a good example. Yoodli was a 10-person company last year. We've now crossing 80, soon to be 100. I'm a first-time CEO. I'm a first-time founder. And all of a sudden, I'm now learning, how do I manage skip levels? I've never done that before. And as a founder, my default on everything is if I see a problem, I'll go fix it. If something's wrong, I'll go talk to the person immediately. And that makes sense. But as a CEO, I'm learning, crap, that's not always a right idea. Because if I go 3 levels down the org, I would have caused chaos that everyone along the way needs to go and fix. And I'm losing the plot. Because AI is giving me all the information, at every point I know what's not working. But gosh, how do I maintain perspective of what is working? Anyhow, that's a long-winded way of saying
that's a great answer. How do you do that, though? because you've got the opposite problem. You're saturated, right?
Correct. So, I've got this problem. Anyhow, I have my daily gratitude agent. So every morning I will get a nudge saying, hey, Varun, here are the 6 people you're meeting with. And here's something incredible they've done in the last few days. And then the idea is when I'm meeting someone on my team and something happens and I see myself getting annoyed, immediately I'll be like, oh yeah, this morning I remember they also did these 5 other amazing things. And it sounds silly and small, but it is a game changer because now I'm showing up with so much more positivity and the good things are front of mind and I can handle my emotions better. Anyhow, so I have lots of little hacks like these.
I love that. That's sensational. I have a saying when I coach my some of the people I work with is just catch people doing something right, because to your point, it's really easy to catch people doing something wrong. And I love the idea of this gratitude concept. And again, to get something that'll help you scale that as you go from 10 to 100 is so cool. We see AI being, I suppose, tacked on to a lot of enterprise software at the moment, kind of as an afterthought and almost as though we've got to do something to appear to be using AI. This is a different solution where AI is at its core. As a product manager, as a CEO, do you think that there's a bit of a failure of imagination in applying AI to innovative use cases rather than trying to tack it onto existing ones?
I think the core of it is it doesn't matter if it's AI or not, it's what's the problem to be solved. In the same vein as when I'm thinking about, is this a mobile app or is it a desktop app? It really doesn't matter. I think a lot of people are trying to put AI on because it increases their share price or it sounds buzzier. I think AI or not doesn't really matter. What matters is what's the most efficient way to solve the problem.
Yeah, okay. Which kind of gets me to my next question then, which is somewhat related to your first answer, which is we've seen a lot of talk about the failure of AI to deliver on the productivity and the ROI that was promised. What's your hypothesis? Well, A, do you think that that's just media hype? And B, if it happens to be true, what's your hypothesis on why that might be?
It's a good question. I think it's very, very company and tool dependent. For instance, if folks are focusing on AI just to drive adoption or token maxing, those incentives likely don't align because your teams are being scored on did they use AI, not did they accomplish their job to be done. For instance, the way we think about ROI at Yoodli is I'm Google, I need to train 15,000 reps on the new Gemini pitch. In the old world, it would take me 6 months to get everyone talking the same language. Now, it took me 6 days. Great, we have reduced ramp. Is that a direct dollar value? Not yet, but my gosh, we can quantify that very, very quickly. I think a lot of people are so focused on telling a story for that ultimate dollar where even the time savings or the productivity improvements are really powerful.
Let's talk a bit about then, we talked about culture and change management, and you've given some great examples of how these sorts of tools can, again, help to be cultural change agents, and I think that's awesome. But there's a second cultural change going on. It's something of an Ouroboros, right? It's like the snake eating its own tail, which is as AI becomes...
Is that called Ouroboros? I've never heard that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is the idea that as AI becomes embedded in everyday work, there's a second type of change going on, which is we've now developing this relationship with software. People are developing this relationship with software. How do you see the relationship and just, I suppose, the human psyche, the human condition? How are you, and you might have observed this already, are you seeing any change in the relationship between the human and the computer as you're watching your users or maybe looking at data streams coming out of the Yoodli system or other research for that matter?
It's a very interesting question. I'll tell you things that we found fascinating. And no, we do not watch our users. We don't have access to anyone's data. Obviously, it's all enterprise security. I think the first thing we are learning is in interacting with AI, people's truest personality comes out. So in our case, typically, if I'm practicing a role play or I'm talking to a customer and I can't hear the customer, I'll be like, can you repeat yourself again? Or if my manager asks me a question that I didn't understand, I'd say, hey, I don't understand. However, when people are practicing with the AI manager or the AI customer, and they can't understand what they're saying, they'll start cursing at it. And then say, this AI is crap, it does not help me. And that's when I realized, holy crap, people hold AI to a much, much higher bar than they hold humans to. Or people are actually a lot more impatient and frustrated. They just have to put on a face with another person. So one, that was an interesting learning, especially as an AI founder, where I said, my technology needs to be really, really strong because I know this is not a one-for-one comparison. The second piece that's been really interesting is, teams now at scale use Yoodli for AI adoption. So I gave you the example of using Yoodli to learn your Gemini pitch, but the way someone like a Google might use Yoodli is to train their teams on how to use Gemini, right? In the old days, I would maybe watch a webinar, a seminar, read a doc, watch a video on 6x speed. Now the AI shares its screen and says, here's how you use Gemini. Now learner, you share your screen and you perform the task with Gemini. And to me, that's really interesting because we've often thought of AI as the AI automating the human task. Now we are seeing a world where the AI is teaching the human on how to interact with AI. And that flow is actually a lot more intuitive to humans than working with a human on how to use AI, because AI essentially understands itself. I had never predicted the latter.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I've got a question about that in just a minute, actually, because you've got me thinking about something else. But going back to this idea that we hold AI to a higher standard, I've observed that myself, and I guess we're so used to thinking of, let's call it information technology, because a computer and information technology are different things. When we think of a computer, a calculator, we think of it's right or it's wrong. In fact, most people would go to a calculator. You've probably heard it yourself. What's the answer to this question? Actually, jump on the calculator and we'll make sure it's accurate. Because the computer and I think by inference, information technology is seen to be authoritative. It's seen to be binary. It's either right or it's wrong. That seems to have carried forward into AI, and I do wonder whether that's actually a hidden risk. Just to your point, we hold these systems now to a higher standard than we would hold a human, but in many respects, and certainly from my layperson's understanding, they are as flawed, if not more flawed, than a human in many respects. What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree 1000%. And I'll give you an example of a really controversial question in our space, which is, Varun, are you just building robots? Are you, if you get the kid in India to talk like Steve Jobs on a TED stage, that's not success, right? There are nuances across regions. There's no right formula for what good speaking looks like. And AI trained on bad data will continue to make everyone speak a certain way. So very, very fair question. And the way I approach that is, my answer is absolutely. I don't think AI is necessarily right. AI should certainly not be the evaluator. So a lot of people ask me, can we use Yoodli? We're using it for candidate prep and interview prep. Why don't we use Yoodli to screen candidates? To which my response is, no. There's lots of technology you can use for that. We didn't build our tech for this because AI is not perfect. And gosh, I don't want at least AI created by us to decide the fate of people's lives. Anyhow, going back to what I was saying was, the way we account for this question of subjectivity is the AI is not the arbiter of truth. The human is. So we work with Toastmasters International, which is a public speaking organization. We'll work with Korn Ferry, which is a management training company. And we might work with a career services center or a company like, let's call it ServiceNow. The humans in each case will determine what good looks like. And they will just put their rubric into the AI. Right, so in Korn Ferry's case, they might use certain methodology. In another sales team's case, they might say use band or medic, or here's our exec speaking, and this is what we define good as. AI just mimic that. And I really like that approach because we don't want to be the ones telling the world, this is good, this is bad. It's here's another human who's an expert in your field who's determined that for your role. Great, you're graded relative to that.
You've clearly, at least by my judgment, in the last 45 minutes, you're clearly a humanist. You clearly think a lot about and care a lot about people, which I think is admirable. So let's talk about a topic that I won't say is controversial, but one I think a few people are worried about, and you've touched on it briefly earlier. AI is predicted to commoditize what we used to think of as uniquely human skills. But at the same time, it's creating new and different opportunities. What skills do you think will become more valuable in response to this technology becoming more widespread? How will humans and our behaviors and what we value change, do you think, over the next couple of decades?
I mean, it's what I was touching on just before this. It seems like information gathering, information processing, information output is already getting commoditized. What is the right answer at the right time, at the right moment? Let's go back to that interview. The McKinsey interviewer asks me how many ping pong balls in a 747. Boom, my AI Neuralink thing is doing all of the processing and knows exactly what to say. I think in that world, how you show up, whether you look someone in the eye and whether you can build trust, and your body language is what makes you even more human. And that's what gets me most excited to work on this problem, which is people will always have to communicate with people. In fact, even more than ever, when everything else is left to machines. How do we help people do that in the best way possible, on the way that's best for them?
It's been awesome getting the opportunity to know you. I'd love to see what happens next at Yoodli and what you do next with the technology. It's an incredible example of how we can use AI to help humans be more human, which I think is a really amazing thing to be able to do. If people are interested in learning more about what you do or AI adoption in the enterprise, change management, where can people go to learn more?
You're welcome to try the technology for free. It's at yoodli.ai. That's YOODLI. We'd love to hear what you think. Practice a speech, upload one of your presentations, your Zoom recordings, your Gong calls, and hopefully you see something fun.
Love that. Excellent. All right. Well, that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, Varun. Really do appreciate you taking the time. This is, my morning, your afternoon.
Such a pleasure. Thank you again for having me.
Awesome. Well, if you've got questions or comments about today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. So please do drop a line in the comment section. You can hit up Cloudera at LinkedIn using the handle at Cloudera with your thoughts. As always, a huge array of guests coming up. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, as I mentioned earlier, make sure to like, share and subscribe so you and your friends don't miss a drop. Thanks again to the folks at Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast. And thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you all, or you'll see me next week.